A ball of fire pierces the atmosphere of Mars, plummeting towards the surface at 13,200 miles per hour. This fireball across the horizon marks the end of a 301 million-mile journey for NASA's InSight and the beginning of a groundbreaking mission. For 5 decades, NASA probes have explored the exterior of the Martian landscape and atmosphere. But now, for the first time, the InSight lander will go deeper than ever before inside the ancient mysteries of the red planet. What's inside Mars? And how can the red planet help us better understand our own?
Go Atlas. Go InSight.
This is the Atlas V.
4, 3.
On May 5th, 2018, it became the first rocket to launch an interplanetary mission from the west coast of the United States. Cruising through space for 205 days, InSight will fly almost halfway around the Sun and eventually intersect with its final destination, Mars. The fourth planet from the Sun, Mars is the second smallest in the solar system. It's a rocky planet like Earth, but much of what's inside is still a mystery. To give us a window into Mars's deep interior, NASA's InSight lander will check the planet's vital signs for clues. Unlike previous Mars missions, this probe will stay in one place for the duration of its mission. First, it will check its pulse. Its sensitive seismometer will gauge vibrations from meteor impacts or Marsquakes caused by shifting rocks. Listening to these shakes and quakes will make it possible for us to determine the depth and composition of its crust, mantle, and core. Next, InSight will check the planet's temperature. Its heat probe will burrow deep underground up to a depth of 16 feet beneath the Martian surface. This groundbreaking device will measure the planet's interior temperatures and track how they fluctuate throughout the year. To complete its checkup, InSight will test the reflexes of Mars by measuring small changes in a radio signal from Earth. This will show us how much the planet wobbles in its rotation, which can give us clues about its core composition. If Mars has a liquid core, its rotation will be more wobbly. And if its core is more solid, we'll see less wobbling. When studied together, these vital signs will give us valuable insight into rocky planets, as well as improve our understanding of how they form. It's exciting to consider the future possibilities of human habitation on Mars. But as we look forward, we must also make sure to look backwards to learn from our solar system's ancient past. Who knows what secrets the universe might reveal?
Hello and welcome to this week's auction update. We'll have a look in just a moment with Geoff White from CoreLogic at the auctions for this weekend, and it appears that they are growing. Back with more detail in just a moment. And welcome back once again. Joining me once again, my co-host Geoff White from CoreLogic. This time we're together, Geoff.
Yes.
Normally we're sort of cities
Miles
apart.
That's right. Yes.
But Geoff has been travelling around the country. We might get a chance to talk about Pippa, because I know you're a member of the board there, and we are great believers. We're members of Pippa. We are also great believers in what they do. So let's talk about that in just a moment. But first of all, the final results for last week's auctions. What do we see, Geoff?
Yeah, the overall clearance rate again was over 50% nationally, so that's a very good sign, a healthy sign, particularly at this stage of the year. 51.2%, and both Sydney and Melbourne both were over 50%, which are key factors to that. Very slight change on the week before, only a matter of 0.x. Very small. So Sydney with 54.6 and Melbourne with 52.5%. So overall, the market there's some light at the end of the tunnel in terms of that is concerned. We obviously saw Adelaide again up to 59%, 59.7, which is a very good result for Adelaide.
And there were some good numbers out of Adelaide too, I think.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly right. There were about 85 auctions in Adelaide. The auction numbers are increasing, primarily in Melbourne and Sydney, but generally increasing as well. So a total of 1,450 auctions and overall 51.2%. So a pretty good result at this time of the year. Yeah,
and Perth? Any news out of Perth?
Look, Perth, low. They're still finding it a little bit tough. The auction market over there is certainly not as buoyant as it is in other cities. 24.3%, so that would have dragged the overall average down a little bit. But and only 42 auctions in Perth. So
Brisbane.
Yeah, Brisbane. Brisbane.
It's difficult, isn't it?
It's up and down a little bit. 28.9%, Kevin. But based off 87 auctions held in Brisbane, again the auctions are fairly consistent in number, but the percentage was down a little bit. Mix and match in Brisbane at the moment. So the coming weeks will be very important to see how that goes.
It's just so interesting week after week when we look at these figures, and you look at the powerhouse of Sydney and Melbourne with their auction numbers. It baffles me why Brisbane can't do more auctions or doesn't do more auctions. Yeah,
I don't know whether it's just the psychic of the way the market operates, because across the board, the Brisbane market's not performing that badly. Certainly not as bad in recent time as Sydney and Melbourne. So therefore, you would think that it's more of an auction-orientated city, but it's certainly not.
I mean, if I were a seller in the Brisbane market right now, and I'm not, but if I were, I certainly would go to auction for that reason, because one thing that auction does, it brings out more buyers, puts them under pressure.
That's right.
And in a market that's growing like Brisbane, you've got a better chance of getting a premium price.
Correct, that's right, exactly right. So I'd encourage agents to look at that, certainly when talking to vendors at the moment.
Interesting you say that, because I think a lot of this is actually driven by the psyche of the agent, not so much the market. I mean, if agents are into auctions, then you'll probably see more auctions happen.
That's right. And if they embrace it, there's some terrific auctioneers in Queensland, and it's been the leader in terms of the REIA auction competition. So they've got some opportunities to really press that home in Brisbane. So go for it, guys.
Absolutely. Okay, let's move to this weekend. Geoff, what do we see? What are the numbers? We'll bring the slide up, our auctions for this weekend. Melbourne up over 1,000 auctions.
Yeah, so as we said, heading into late February, early March, the numbers would rise. So over 1,000, 1,049, Sydney 753. Overall, we're at 2,150, which is up from 1,450 last week. So you can see a fairly significant rise. Some people are saying this will be a significant test for the market, particularly in Melbourne and Sydney. There would be some truth in that, I would think, given the auction volumes. We've got suburbs like East Bentley and Melbourne, with 19 auctions. So it's certainly well back into the numbers we were seeing towards the end of last year.
And those figures out of Adelaide, 110 auctions. Adelaide's an interesting market, and we just had a presentation from Peter Kaloutzos at Pippa talking about the Adelaide market. And I must admit, I hadn't seen that it was going as well as what it is.
Again, it's been the quiet performer really over all of the recent market changes around the country, and the Adelaide market is relatively strong given what's going on. 110 auctions this week, so the numbers are pretty healthy in Adelaide. So that would be an interesting test for Adelaide as well. But you're quite right. Adelaide and Brisbane, always having around that sort of high 80s, 90s into early hundreds. Brisbane with 112 this weekend. So that again, we'll see how that goes with the clearance rates.
We will indeed. We're going to take you to the rolling average now. And the reason I love this graph, Geoff, and we'll just bring it up on the screen now, this sort of smooths it out. We can talk week after week about what's happening, but this graph sort of tells a real story. Can we read anything into the fact that right at the end of the graph there's a bit of an uptick?
Yeah, it's like a cat's tail, and the cat's getting a bit excited towards the end, which is great. And well, this is the clearance rate that we've been seeing over the last few weeks, and that's why that graph is showing that. I think
it actually shows the low point, doesn't it? I mean, if you look at the low point in that graph,
that's right.
We haven't been that low for quite some time.
Yes, that's right. So, but looking at where it's come from the low and going up, it shows clearly what was happening at the end of last year, and it's showing what's happened in recent weeks. The interesting factor will be over the course of the balance of this month going into March, just to see whether that continues to see escalation or may plateau. And I look, all the indications are that there is, you know, a lot more buoyancy in the market in terms of buyers back in the market. But the question is, Kevin, are the buyers getting the finance to go and buy the properties? And that's the key factor. Yeah,
that is the key factor. And let's move on now to our conversation after breakfast this morning, where we saw a very good talk by Peter Kalutzos, who is the president of PIPA. And he made that very point, didn't he? He talked about supply and demand, and how supply is one thing, but demand is really the key factor right now, and how heavily that's been influenced by finance restrictions. I was surprised to hear the number of refused finance applications. It actually grown to 1 in 2 now.
That's right.
Is likely to be refused. Yes. Compared to a year ago, where I think the figure he said was about 8 to 10%.
Correct. That's right. Yes, a significant change.
Significant.
So that's a major factor as to why we've been through what we've been through. If you think that 1 in 2 or 1 in 3 are not getting their finance, and they may well have had their finance approved 2 or 3 years ago, and in some cases there's a lot of genuine circumstances here, that certainly put the brakes on the market, and the demand is the key. That is quite true.
Yes, because for quite some time we've been focused on interest rates, haven't we? And the RBA will bring out their interest rate decision every month, and then we sort of look at what that impact that's going to be on the market. But really it makes very little difference. If the banks have an attitude where they're going to become tighter on their lending, that's the key influencer for the market.
Exactly right, yes. And I mean, they're even talking about possibly interest rate reductions, given the effect of the housing market on the overall economy.
Yeah, so it's interesting, we revel when there's a reduction in rates, but it's really an indication that the market isn't really all that healthy.
Correct, yes, that's right.
So we have to bear that in
when
mind
the RBA reduces rates, it's a question mark over the whole economy. That's correct.
Absolutely. Geoff, can I just go to one other point too that I wanted to cover, and that was PIPA's drive to educate consumers about the likely impact of what will happen if Labor government do win, if Labor win the next federal election, and their promises to play with negative gearing.
Yeah, well, the impact obviously is that with changes to negative gearing and capital gains tax, it will impact severely in the investor market. And what that does mean, it does mean that the investors will be further removed from the marketplace. It will also mean that they won't be acquiring property, so therefore there'll be pressure on escalating rents. And what it will potentially do, and this is the real concern, is not just for the investors' properties, but everybody's properties could take a hit, and in terms of their value. And we've experienced that over the last 12 months. So we don't want to escalate that in any other way. So our organisation, PIPA, who I represent also, is strongly advocating for the status quo to remain. The Liberals, the current government, the federal government, if they're returned, I think that will be the case. If there's a change of government in terms of the ALP getting in, well, it's a little bit unknown, and they've certainly said what they think they will do. But
I've spoken to Peter about this, and Peter Kalutzos, and I think it was great that there was a roundtable conversation earlier this week in Canberra but it was probably with the wrong people.
Yes.
You know, it should really be, that message needs to get across to the Labor Party about what their policies are likely to do to the Australian housing market.
Yes, and I think their policies are a bit sort of vague. On the one breath, they've come out with a statement, and then they're sort of saying that, well, they might tune that, and but that we may not know until they're actually in, and that's going to obviously be too late.
Yeah, I do think it's all politics, obviously, and it's low-hanging fruit. It's appealing to, you know, we've got to curtail the activities of these greedy investors.
That's right.
When I think Margaret Lomas made a very good point this morning as well, that, you know, maybe these quote greedy investors are just one step ahead of the tenants in terms of building their own wealth. Yes,
that's right. And the statistics show that the average investor is a typical mum and dad that's trying to prepare for their retirement, and they may have 1 or 2 investment properties, but that's about it. It's not, you know, that they own a portfolio of 50 or 60 properties. It's not the case. So we're actually going to damage and hurt the future of those people that are trying to invest for their own personal future. So it's an important issue, and one that the whole industry, all industry bodies are grappling with at the moment. And fortunately, we've got the ear of the current government, but we don't know whether they're going to be returned in the next election. So
good message, and that's what we're going to leave you for today. Thanks very much for being with us, Geoff. Thank you. Lovely to catch up with you here, and one-on-one. We should do this more often. And just to recap, auction activity over the weekend is picking up. Over 1,000 auctions, certainly in Melbourne, almost 1,000 in Sydney, I think 700, 800.
Yeah, that's right.
And the numbers are picking up in some of the other capital cities as well. We're going to come back on Monday with Geoff, and we'll give you a wrap as to what happened over the weekend. Until then, have a good day, have a great weekend, and we'll see you again soon. Thanks, Geoff.
All the best. Thank you.
First time out, you know, you got to come out swinging. We had a goal. I mean, She's Gonna Have It did not happen right after NY Film School. You know, so all the time after graduating film school, I was working towards my first feature. People are not going to come to New York City because Spike Lee says anything. I mean, New York City is an advertisement, you know, of its own. I've done several films about Brooklyn, where Brooklyn is the backdrop. Do the Right Thing, Crooklyn, Clockers, and they're just stories that take place here. I don't know what it is, but there's something about Brooklyn. It's the people, the diversity, the culture, the people that make up this great borough. I mean, I grew up here, you know, developed person who I am, who I've become, and so therefore, that has been the subject of a lot of my films. The one thing I will say, that if you do come to New York City, you gotta walk over the Brooklyn Bridge. That's a requirement. This is the greatest bridge that's been built.
London Bridge is small potatoes compared to the Brooklyn Bridge. If you can, before you leave this planet, you must come here to visit.
You know, I was never gonna move to Hollywood, to LA. Scorsese's here, Woody Allen's here. They didn't move. People gotta discover for themselves. I mean, discover for yourself. Discover for yourself.